Folks, welcome back to the Manana No Mas podcast. I am with Sukoshi Fahey, and she has graciously agreed to spend some time with us, and I hope that you enjoy this. For those of you enrolled in the Fixed Operations course on Manana No Mas, if you're a service writer, service manager, this is somebody that you could learn a lot from, and dealing with your customers and how to talk about tires. Sukoshi, welcome to the show. How are you?
Oh, I'm good. I'm thrilled and excited to be talking to you after all these years of a lot of email communications and
yeah. It like I was saying in our pre-call, it's for me, I had reached out to so many different companies and so many different people, and then there's just those certain names that kind of stick out along the way, and yours is definitely one of those. And one of the things that struck me was, and I feel this way about folks at like Motorex is like this with me, Avon. I'm going to mention Bridgestone. Bridgestone was like that, but there was always like the consistent people that were always part of the industry that always seemed willing to help or willing to kick in. And I always appreciated that about working with you.
Yeah, I think for all the tire people, and I can say this, we're all friends. I know we're competitors, but I think any one of us would bend over backwards to help, the other person if they ever, needed it in their personal life or whatever. So I really enjoy all the tire people I know.
Good. Tell me a little bit about the journey that you've had professionally and getting to where you're at currently.
I started out in Canada. I worked for the Pirelli importer. And so that's how I got my start with tires. We carried a lot of other tires as well. So my knowledge, because of my knowledge with Pirelli tires, I was invited to go work for Metzler Pirelli, the agency that was handling the brand down in Washington State. So I moved there in 1990, and we moved from there to Pennsylvania. And so it was a trip across the country. And around the year 2000, I went and worked for riderworld.com, which was a very unique website. I've still never seen anything like it. It had an online auction. We could put people in contact who were looking for a Harley with a dealer who had that particular bike when Harleys were in short supply. It was just a very all-encompassing website. And fortunately, that was the year of the dot-coms, and It went the way of the dot-coms. So in 2001, I reached out to Larry Hoppy, who was handling the Avon brand. And after a couple of back and forth, he said, I don't know, I don't have a position for you, but I will make something for you. So I moved back to Washington State and been doing Avon tires up until a few weeks ago. And
wow.
Yep, I was laid off. I mean, it's been a tough time in the tire industry for everybody, car, truck tire, motorcycle tire.
Yeah.
With just a lot of changes because of the internet and other things.
So I was going to ask about that. Like when you say it's been tough, so we're in the power sports realm, right? And so we take a look at things like sales numbers for Harley Davidson. They post their numbers every quarter, and every year all the doomsayers come out and say, oh, it's just another nail in the coffin, right? But there's other people are starting up companies, like there's some kind of opportunity that nobody's seeing. Like, Alta came and went. Zero's still pushing with their electric example. I think it was Mr. Fisher that was based off an SV650, and he was making an American-made sport bike. And it's like, what do you think keeps driving people to try and push forward in the industry when some of the bigger ones are struggling just for status quo?
I think and hope springs eternal, and we always like to think we can do something or make something. It's just like how people can't leave a stock bike alone. They've always got to tweak it or do something to it. One of the guys that we've worked with, he owns Tarform in New York, and that's an electric bike company. He is an amazing person to listen to, just sort of almost like TED Talk and he did do a TED Talk actually. I think obviously electric is the way to go for the future, I believe. I mean, I've worked with, over the years, Bramo, Segway, T3 Motion. So we actually, when I was at Avon, worked with a lot of electric companies over the years. I think we've got the industry has challenges in getting millennials into the motorcycle sport. A lot of them don't want to own cars, bikes, homes.
Yeah.
And the good thing about electric bikes is that they do wear out the rear tire faster. So that's one good hope. People aren't riding as much, and they aren't, wearing out the tires, and tires last longer. So
yeah. So
not a lot of.
You touched on a question that I was actually waiting to ask, and that was, I was hoping we would mention electric bikes and tire wear. So I'm a fixed operations expert. So I'm telling people how to increase their parts and labor business, at the dealership level, with providing the right customer service and, reducing employee turnover. I mean, doing it the right way, not just ripping people off. And the electric bikes always kind of scare me from a fixed operations point of view, because they don't have a lot of maintenance. Like, you can replace the throttle if the throttle goes bad. You can replace a battery right in it, and then it's, brakes and tires. I mean, it's not so I've ridden a lot of electric bikes, and their acceleration factor, their torque at low speed is pretty huge. I was going to ask, do they manufacture the tires differently for the electric bikes? Are they the same tires? Are they working on something to deal with those extra forces, or how does that work?
The tires that, when I was at Avon, that they built were no different for the electric bikes. For example, for Bramo, we used, they actually wanted a size that nobody makes in a bias ply. We had it in a radial, so we took the green stock of the radial, used that for the size. So it was a bias ply, but it was a radial size. It was a 1/20/60/17, which is a very weird size in a bias ply and very hard to find. So, you can get creative. A lot of the electric bikes are lighter, so you've got that going for you. Yes, you've got all that power to the rear wheel, but you've also got, generally, lighter electric bikes. I don't know how much the new Harley electric bike weighs. I haven't really checked that out. Maybe you know.
No, I don't.
Yeah. So, but I think probably one of the heavier bikes I've seen was Brutus did an electric cruiser, and they put our regular cruiser tire on, and no issues with that. So, and we've even had one that was an upright motorcycle on a big 240 tire. So you rode it like a unicycle. It was, we've done a lot of weird stuff over the years. So
yeah. That's cool stuff. Well, tell me, Sukoshi, from a fixed operations point of view, because, that's kind of our audience with service writers, service managers, what kinds of things can a service writer look for? Like, say they're doing a service intake, customer pulls up on a motorcycle, it's 2-3 years old. As a tire professional, what are the things that you think help a service writer do the job better when they're dealing with the customer?
I think, first of all, you've got to have that faith and trust and establish that with the customer. Before you go anywhere, you've got to have that. I believe, obviously, it's best if people have matching front and rear tires. A lot of times tires don't wear out the same. That is the ideal. So that's an opportunity, if they've got mismatched tires, to convince them of that. Generally, we find anytime we get people to pull in and do a tire pressure check, they are obviously a lot of times very underinflated. I've seen tires with as little as 15 pounds in them instead of 38, 40 pounds. I think another way that the service writers can help their customers is give them some advice for future. I think a lot of people don't realize tires lose air just all by themselves. They're rubber, they're permeable, they lose air. They can lose 1 to 2 pounds a month. So it's critical that customers, if they want to preserve their tire wear, that they check their tire pressure. And on, they can also suggest that on a trip, they check their tire pressure every day. That, to me, is the most critical way when you're riding loaded, high speeds, hot temperatures, usually in the summer. Those are really hard conditions on tires. The other thing a service writer could recommend to a customer is in the winter time, if you do live in a cold area, get both tires up off the ground. Tires do not, when they contact the cold concrete in your garage or wherever, that cold goes up through and it causes cracking on the sidewall, sometimes even in the tread area. So I always say get a block of wood, a piece of carpet, anything like that that gets the tires up off the ground. And if you are in an area like California, Arizona, cover that bike because the ozone it'll eat up tires. I had my car tires in 6 months degrade. 6 months.
Wow.
That's all it took.
Yeah. I've seen that before too.
Yeah.
So, I used to live in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and tires there would just come in. They'd change color, everything. It was like almost an instantaneous thing.
Yeah.
And it would be so weird to look a customer in the eye at the service counter. They see the tread and they think the tire's good, but then you're like, no, look here at the sidewall, look at the discoloration, look at this, look at that. And then, finally the customer's like, well, then they act like, well, then what other tire can I get? Because obviously this tire's defective or this tire's bad. It's like, no, you live where the sun shines 310 days out of the year, and it's 100 degrees. So it's sometimes it can be a tough conversation, but I think if service writers have the right education and the right approach, well, then they can help the customer and increase sales at the same time.
Yeah. I think it's critical to get the people in there and check their tire pressure and check the condition. A lot of times people eyeball their tire and they think it's okay, but that's when don't have your weight on the bike. And all of a sudden, if somebody else was looking at you, they'd see that tire was underinflated just from you sitting on it.
Yeah. I actually have a real world story about a guy with a tire story. And it's mind blowing to me because I think about who I am. So, and this sounds like a really pompous thing to say, right? But it's like, if these things happen in my presence, like on a sport bike ride, it can happen to anybody, right? And that we're all responsible for everyone that we're with, as like a group mentality, right? So I was leaving Tucson, Arizona, and was meeting people by the copper mines at the northern part of Arizona. I think it's Highway 191 or 171. It's like the twistiest road in the west, goes over the mountains and back up towards Highway 40, which would take us back to Albuquerque. So I left Tucson, and two guys left Albuquerque and met me down by those copper mines. And so, we had this whole thing planned. And as soon as we meet, we get pulled over by the police 3 times in one town. And we were told, you guys look fast. Don't screw around in our town. And we're just going for lunch. So we finally get out of town and we're going up the hill and it's twisty. I'm riding wheelies in between turns because I'd fancied myself really good at that at the time. I was on an R1. My buddy was on a 954. And another guy was on an R6. He just had custom painted. And I didn't know this guy. But they'd come down together 120, 130 miles an hour down the highway to meet me, right? So I'm following my friend in front of me, and this new guy is behind me. And so I keep looking in the mirror whenever my front wheel's on the ground, and just to make sure that, we're all together. And all of a sudden I look, and he's doing like a Pier Francesco Chili imitation. He is sliding right off the road. The bike flips over, tumbles. We pick him up. We pick the bike up. The bike's half destroyed. We got to zip tie a bunch of things back together just to get it back to town. We get back to town and he's got like 14 PSI in his front tire. And he's going, I don't understand what happened. I don't know what happened. I just went into the turn and nothing seemed to happen. The bike just kind of went straight when I wanted to turn. And I'm like, you rode here. You just rode hundreds of miles at triple digit speeds with no air in your front tire. And it's that type of experience in life. Like when you look at that and that happened 15, 18 years ago. And you look at that now and you go, holy crap, people are still riding like that. People still do that. So what you bring up is very valid.
Yeah, I see it at rallies all the time. I see people with bald tires. I mean, they are down to the cords. And I had one gentleman that I said, "Sir, you need a new tire." And he's like, "Oh, I can get one more night out of it." Oh,
One
I
more
said,
night.
"It's going to rain tonight." And that was the only reason he changed his mind, was that it was going to rain. I mean, it was where you could stick a pencil in that and just pop it. And I've been highly tempted to do that. Another thing I run into a lot is people think the tire delaminated on them. They're just like, "Oh, the tire just came apart." And I'm like, "No, you probably got a nail in there."
Probably
And
got a
pretty
nail.
well every time we get it up on the lift, the nail's in there. Sometimes it's even gone through and it's not there anymore, but you can see where it's penetrated, and the tire, it starts getting hotter and hotter inside, and finally it gets hot enough. It's just like us, when we get too hot, we start throwing off clothes, and that tire just starts flinging off tread.
Yeah.
But, yeah, and another area I think that service writers could help is probably checking the date code. And I've seen people with 10, 15-year-old tires on their bikes. There's a myth out there, and people are like, "Oh, go in your warehouse and pick the newest tire you can find."
Yep.
They're
Fresh out of the
not
mold.
like, yeah, they're not like milk. They're not like eggs. They do not spoil. Most manufacturers will warranty tires for 5 to 7 years. I've seen tires that were 15 years old that were blue, like you could, crack your fingernails on them. But we took that tire out, and it came back. The grip level came back. You cannot tell, even with a durometer, if a tire has lost its grip. You have to take it out and slowly test it. But that said, we do like people to use up the tire within that 7-year period.
Nice. So you say it almost like a helmet manufacturer, right? Somewhere between 5 and 7 years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. 'Cause tires do get a little harder. They do. The grip level does go off. So, but a tire that is 1 or 2 years old, it's fine. People are just like, "Oh, this tire isn't made this year." I even had Ari Henning. I said, "Could you write an article about this, just to explain to people why it's okay?"
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Now, I'm trying to think of the right way to ask this question, because I don't want to box you into a corner. But from a service writer perspective, and not laying on any brand loyalties that you might have, how do you think is a good way for a service writer to talk to a rider about changing the brands on the bike?
A couple of things. I mean, a lot of people are very brand loyal, as you said. They don't know that there's actually something better out there. And it doesn't even mean what gets put on a bike a lot of times is not the best. It is the most economical that the bike manufacturer can find. But it's not necessarily having the best grip, the best longevity, the best comfort. And I know when I worked at Sturgis, for example, and a customer would come in and they'd say, "Oh, I just want what's on the bike." And I go, "Well, we can do that. Or if you would like something that gives you better mileage, better grip, better handling, for $10, $15 more, would that, be of interest to you?" So it's a little bit of an upsell, but they're getting their value for what they're getting back. And people would come back the next day, and you're like, and they're just, "You are right. This thing, when I can rail into the corners, I don't have to think about it. The tire just leans in." So definitely, if you can upgrade a customer to something that, especially if they're at a level where they've been riding for a few years, somebody who's just a new rider, they're probably not going to notice the difference. But if somebody is a really a good rider, experienced rider, then get them on the best. Maybe it'll cost a little more, but it's a little more money in your pocket as well.
Yeah, I can remember there was one article I did, and it was with one of your products. I was riding from Denver to Birmingham and back to Denver again, and it was on an R1, and it was to go see the Barber Superbike races. So it was like a 5,000-mile trip because I got lost. I went up by the Corvette Museum and went up the wrong way instead of coming back across the country. And so I did like 5,000 miles, 4.5 days. I put a sport touring tire from you guys on an R1. And everyone said, "Oh, you're crazy, you're crazy, you're crazy. That'll never work." And I had the best ride. Did it wheelie as good as it did before? No, there was an extra 3 pounds on the front wheel. But the bike handled, I thought, well. It was super stable. It was, things that for the purpose of that trip, it worked out really well. And then just to put the nail in the coffin on those tires, when I got back to Denver, I did a track day on them just to make a point.
Oh, wow.
And so I did 5,000 miles and a track day, and then posted the pictures of, tires new, tires this, tires after a track day, pictures all the way across the country and back. And it was neat. And people thought I was crazy, but I was like, if you understand the purpose, or if you understand, if you have a pinpointed reason to use something, then that's an okay thing to do. And it was weird. That article got a lot of back and forth commenting, obviously, because it was a little controversial, but it was really fun. I super, super enjoyed the whole project was cool. Yeah. And then
go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say, and then we swapped the sport touring tires off and put on your performance tire, and then did another track day. I think it was like 3 days later, and that was at Second Creek Raceway in Denver. That place was really tight and twisty. And it was amazing, the difference, right? To take off that heavy carcass, put on the lighter tire, get the better curve, the whole thing. So then we did a comparison article between the two different tires on the same bike.
Yeah, I mean, with the deeper tread depth on the the sport touring tires that Avon makes have the same tread depth on the rear generally as our cruiser touring tire. So it's a very deep tread depth for a sport touring tire.
Yeah.
And a lot of the stunt riders we've sponsored over the years, they use our extreme track tire on the front, and then they'll use our sport touring tire on the rear, because they want to do the wheelies and the burnouts. But when they do the stoppies and everything, they want the traction. But on the rear, they wanted to do a totally different process. So, and I've even had sport riders that want a little more mileage because they're commuting, but want the grip on the front. So they'll put a sport tire front, sport touring tire on the rear.
Yeah. Yeah. So when you said that tire sales had gone down, right? You said the industry's rough, everything's going down. I was a little taken aside by that, to be honest. You kind of caught me by surprise, because I knew that new motorcycle sales were down, mm-hmm. but I didn't realize that like ridership in general is down. It's like even though we're in the industry and we see like the numbers going down and down, do you believe ridership in general is down? Because I assumed that if sales were down at the new side, like if sales is down, then after sales would kind of pick up some of the slack. Like I thought after sales would pick up, because ridership, I still ride. Like I have a 17-year-old Hayabusa in the drive. I still use it.
Yeah. I think one of the challenges that a lot of the premium tire manufacturers are facing is that a lot of cheaper brands are flooding the market, and a lot of riders, because they maybe only are riding 3,000 to 5,000 miles, they don't see why they should put on a premium brand. So if they can get a brand they can get 2 for 1 for the price of one premium tire, that's what they're doing. That has hurt a lot of the premium brands. Even Harley dealers I've seen it. For a used bike, they want to put new tires on, so they just go and get a cheaper brand. I know Dunlop has been fighting that with one of their brands that they've got that is a more reasonably priced tire. It's a little harder for some companies if they don't produce tires in Turkey or Korea or somewhere like that. Avon tires, for example, are still made in the Avon factory, so obviously more expensive than producing in a country like Asia, for example. And I've seen the import stats and how they've changed over the years. Things used to be produced in Japan. Now it's, China and Serbia and, all kinds of countries you would never think of doing tires.
Nice. Well, I'm looking at the time because I want to respect your time. Talk to me about your new adventures. What kind of new adventure do you think you might be headed towards? And if people want to get in touch with you, how can people get in touch with you and possibly leverage you for their projects?
Sure. In a way, I always think that things happen for a reason, and I have learned over the years that it's pretty well always been for the better. So maybe this was a time in my career that I needed a reset, utilize my skills. I've been around sales for a long time, but I do love helping customers. I love the training aspect, and I like answering technical questions. So I thought, okay, this is a time for me to, take some courses, sit back. Everybody's told me, don't just rush into, doing something again. So I have. I've been sitting here for the last couple of weeks, and that's why on my LinkedIn, I put the name of my company, which is Sukoshi Inc. And I am available for people if they want to consult me on my tire expertise, on technical editing or writing or training staff. The good thing with nowadays, you've got Zoom, you've got WebEx, you've got GoToMeeting.
Oh yeah.
Or I'm also available if somebody, wanted me to fly somewhere. That's not a problem either. So they can, get a hold of me on LinkedIn, and obviously Sukoshi Fahey is probably the easiest way. Yeah.
Nice. So you and I are in a similar position, and I think we both have a very similar outlook. I was at Suzuki. Most of my listeners know that I was at Suzuki for the last 4 years, and when they had a reduction in force, I was on the phone before I even left their parking lot. I was actually like, hey, things are for the better. Let's see what's out there, and had job offers the next day. And similar to what you just said, I was like, it might be foolish to turn something down now. Like, I might regret this decision in 3 months, right? But I wanted to make smart decisions over quick decisions. And I wanted to give, myself and my family a chance to reset and kind of really look at our priorities. And, we live down here in Southern California. I don't even know if we want to stay in Southern California. It's really expensive here. I love Idaho. Maybe we'll go to Idaho. But it's, like you said, if we can do things on Zoom, if we can do things on WebEx, the internet's a fantastic work environment. And, I can't get the coronavirus sitting by myself in my garage making Zoom calls. So,
I know. I'm really happy I'm not traveling right now.
so there are some fun things. Some friends of mine from church actually just popped up on Facebook this morning. They are quarantined in a hotel in Jerusalem.
Oh my gosh.
They went overseas to do a missions thing, and it just came out today. And I'm like, why are you there? How are you still there?
Well, I know I'm in Seattle, which is, of course, the hardest hit state. And Costco, out of toilet paper, out of water, out of everything is sanitizer. It's the sky is falling. The sky is falling right here. And like you said, though, the good thing with the internet and Zoom is it's transferable. If I move to Canada or anywhere else, I can do this online.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Canada. I've been to Whistler. I've consulted some dealers up there. Their business model is completely different in the service area than it is in America, so it was a good learning experience. And I used to do the training for Ducati at Niagara Falls. We would get a hotel at Niagara Falls and then do the training on that side of the country. So yeah, I'm a big fan of Canada, and it sounds like we had a lot in common going back and forth. Yeah. I was actually raised in Philadelphia. So
I lived there too. So yeah, I've lived in Arizona and Philadelphia, and my plan is, to go back to Canada at some point, and I don't know when that will be, but it could be sooner or it could be later. So
sooner could be later. Well,
I'm taking a leaf out of your book and taking a little bit of time to figure this all out.
Nice. Well, Sukoshi, I certainly appreciate your time with Manana No Mas. You may think that what you shared was very surface level, but I'll tell you, I think for our audience, they'll see a lot of value in what you had to share, how to deal with customers, how to talk to them about tire product. And I certainly wish you the best in whatever direction you decide to go in and how this thing develops for you over the foreseeable future.
Oh, I really appreciate the time. And thank you, Kurt, for reaching out.
Oh, no worries. Have a good one. Thank you so much.
Okay, cheers.